back again on Be Bold, going strong. Lots of stories you've seen so far.
Stories.
Now, up next, we have someone very special again. I know we have a lot of special people in here, but she is my rock. The next lady, Vanessa Bannerman. She's my rock. I've been with her through high school, through university. She's my best friend, my sister. So this is quite deep. It's a personal interview that we had.
Very personal.
But this is a segment that we're also dealing with the diaspora and
seeing what it is that people do when they're not living in Ghana or in Africa, and what motivates them to stay there or think about eventually coming back and help community here.
So let's take a look at Vanessa Bannerman's story. Alright, welcome to Be Bold Season 3, and I'm sitting here with Vanessa Bannerman, one of our very, very, very good friends, and I'm so excited to be interviewing her today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Yes, so tell me, Vanessa, what is it exactly you do currently? What's your status?
Well, I live in Montreal, Canada, and I am an assistant buyer for a huge clothing retail company in Canada. So yeah, ultimately that's what I do. I take production of clothing for our specific designated stores, from design stage to distribution stage in all our stores.
How long have you been doing this for?
3 years.
3 years. So right after university, you went straight into that?
Pretty much in that industry. And I've always kind of been in the retail industry, even while in school, be it a part-time job or, working in stores and whatnot. So, yeah.
Well, what about other ways of, in terms of in business, have you been connected, still doing anything here with people? Or is it solely like what you're doing in Canada?
Well, no. I feel there's a huge opportunity to work in the retail industry here. And I also feel as though we don't really have that retail culture. So over the past year, I have been working with a local fashion designer to sort of, take the bull by the horns and sort of, take advantage of that opportunity to bring that retail culture to Ghana first, and hopefully, throughout Africa, to sort of put designers on the map the way they should be, but not just fashion, but retail, buying processes, merchandising properly, store setups properly, which in my opinion we don't really have here. We don't really have people who invest the time and the money to actually establish these retail stores properly. And I'm assuming and hoping that my skill and expertise will be able to help this brand, be some sort of a market leader when it comes to retailing.
Now, I want to talk more again about being a woman, especially in an African setting, compared to Canada, where perhaps, women are allowed to be more in charge and do certain things. Well, not necessarily, because sometimes even outside you still face, because you're a woman, you face certain boundaries that you're not able to. How do you think that, moving back to Ghana, what do you think, what some of the challenges you'd face in that angle in trying to get to your goals?
I think there's certainly that sense of gender inequality in the workplace. There is that, notion that women should be at home or should be the wives or the caregivers. So there's definitely that lack of, equality. But I think it's consistent through cultures, regardless where. It's not necessarily something that I see as an obstacle for myself. It's definitely an obstacle in general, but you have to sort of
push. All right, a little away from the topic of what we're discussing now, let's talk about brain drain and the issue of a lot of very intelligent, Ghanaians are leaving the country to sort of seek greener pastures. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely an eye-opening experience. I went away, well, I'm still away. I got an education from a Canadian institution. I have a very different perspective on a lot of things in comparison to my Ghanaian colleagues. So I think it's good that people would want to leave. I don't necessarily think that this greener grass syndrome is something that is positive. I actually think it's a very, very, it has a huge negative impact on Ghana, because I feel when you go and you're able to take advantage of what somebody else has to offer, it's always best to bring it back and try to help. The only thing is sometimes there isn't necessarily a fit between what you did, what you learned or gained elsewhere in Ghana, because culture plays a huge role. So yes, there's brain drain, but I don't necessarily think people are not coming back because they don't want to. Maybe there isn't necessarily a fit. Maybe there isn't necessarily that need or that attachment to being back home, in which case you don't necessarily even want to have people like that come back, right?
Do you think there's also a fear? People are afraid that, you know, in wherever in the world they have systems set up for them to do things. Like for instance, you know, you can rent right after you come out. Let's say you're working, you can get your own apartment, you can get your own car, etc., etc. You have bills, yes, but then they allow you to get all these things. Whereas coming back home, it's like a bit more difficult to do that. Do you think people have that fear to want to come back? And how do you think we can overcome some of these fears?
I think you have, personally, I always consider the cultural aspects of things. If you're moving back home, generally in Ghana, I've noticed people stay at home for much longer, even when they start working, because, you know, the financial system is very different. The credit system is very different. You have credit by the time you're 17, 18 in the US or in Canada, whereas in Ghana, it could be much later. So, you know, you have to take that into consideration. Things are much more expensive in Ghana, I have found, in terms of housing or rent or, you know, buying furniture or, you know, building a life for yourself. So, yeah, it's very difficult, and I think people shy away from that because they want that sense of ownership and independence. But you know, you have to take it a step at a time. You have to give a little to get a little. So, you know, if it's a little sacrifice that you have to make to stay home a little longer while you establish yourself, and it's something that is culturally accepted, then you do just that to get where you need to be. You can't really, there isn't really a comparison there, or at least there shouldn't be, in my opinion.
All right, well, you know, you've told us, you know, some of your experiences and what you think about a lot of the things I've talked about. Can you, and we know that I know that you're actually quite successful, you know, after you did your university, going through all the jobs that you've gone through and stuff. Can you give advice? I mean, and you're almost on the brink of returning home. So that means you've made your plan and you've planned for how you're going to make that transition. Can you advise people out there, those that are also perhaps close to also moving back or not, like what are some of the things that you thought was necessary that you did for yourself that they could perhaps also think about doing?
I think the most important thing is really to network. I think it's important to do your research, do some homework, figure out what your skills are, and then figure out where those skills fit in, and don't box yourself out, you know. There's so many ways that you can apply yourself. Anybody who is educated or has any sort of training, you know, works hard, you can find different opportunities. There are so many different opportunities in Ghana, I think, which might not necessarily match what you studied or what you worked in. But do your research, find out what people are doing, find out where people work. What are you interested in doing? What are the gaps that are missing in those markets? Where can you bring something new? And start talking